날씨가 너무 추워진 것 같아요.
그러니까 지난주까지 완전 따뜻했었는데 갑자기 추워진 것 같아요.
지난번에 필리핀 태풍도 그렇고 세계적으로 이상기후가 너무 많이 나타나는 것 같아요. 이러다 진짜 지구가 멸망하는 거 아닐까?
근데 기후 문제가 정말 인류 수제로 떠오르는 건 맞는 것 같아요. 근데 이러한 고민을 함께 할 수 있는 사람이 이번 주 게스트죠. 존번 교수님. 존번 교수님이 이번에 우리나라에 온 특별한 이유가 있다면서요?
네, 서울국제에너지자문단이 구성됐어요. 그게 에너지 자립도시를 목표로 세계적인 석학 10분이 오셨는데 존번 교수님도 그중 한 분이세요.
존번 교수님이 노벨평화상 수상하셨잖아요.
맞아요. 그러니까 2007년에 엘고어 부통령이랑 같이 공동수상을 했었어요.
당시에 그 기후변화에 대한 경각심만으로도 노벨상을 받았다고 화제가 좀 됐었죠.
어떻게 보면은 기후 문제만큼 인류 전체 평화가 걸려있는 문제도 흔치는 않은 것 같아요. 사실 뭐 핵 문제나 뭐 분쟁, 전쟁 이런 거는 사실 국제적인 문제지만은 기후 문제는 지구 전체가 사느냐 마느냐의 문제잖아요.
그러니까 그 진짜 블랙아웃 공포 사실 영화 속 이야기 이제 아니잖아요. 이번 여름에도 사실 좀 아슬아슬했잖아요. 네.
지구 평균 온도가 100년 동안 1도 정도 올랐는데 우리나라는 심지어 1.7도나 올라서 훨씬 평균을 웃돌아요.
우리나라는 설비 한 방울도 안 나오는데 뭐 에너지 소비량도 많고 수입 연료 의존도도 굉장히 높다고 해요. 이번 겨울에도 조금 걱정이 돼요. 다들 내복 입었죠?
그래서 존번 교수님이 이제 자꾸 추천하시는 게 새로운 에너지 대안이 있어야 된다. 근데 그게 바로 이제 에너지 효율이라고 얘기를 하세요.
그러니까 풍력, 지열, 뭐 수소 에너지 뭐 이런 거 다 쉬는 재생 에너지 다 포함된
에너지가 쉬지는 않아서 그렇다고 해서.
신재생 에너지.
네, 수소연료로 가는 친환경 자동차도 이미 수용화되고 있다고 하고.
그래서 여러분들의 많은 의문점을 제가 존번 교수님에게 조목조목 여쭤보도록 할게요.
그런데 이것저것 개발하는 것보다 덜 쓰는 게 더 중요하지 않아요?
예리한데.
맞는
근데
거예요.
사실 뭐 기본으로 그냥 돌아가자 하는 것도 방법 중에 하나일 것 같아요.
그러니까 개발도 절약도 필요한 게 요즘 같은 에너지 시대의 고민인 것 같아요. 근데 키워드 많이 나온 것 같으니까 한번 정리를 해볼게요. 자, 첫 번째는 노벨상을 할까요? 노벨상? 어때요?
네, 괜찮은 것 같은데요.
오케이, 싫으면 그럼 다른 거 해도 돼요. 노벨상, 기후 문제죠. 또 뭐가 있을까요?
저는 그 서울의 에너지에 대한 공부는 발전은 해야 되고 그렇다고 또 아까 세미가 말한 대로 이렇게 절약만 하고 있을 수만은 없을 것 같고 정말 실질적인 대안이 뭔가 현실적으로
하나는 더 해야 되겠죠?
저는 기후가 요즘 이상하게 돌아가니까 그 지구가 멸망하진 않을까 이런 두려움도 좀 있거든요.
음모론자신 것 같아요.
약간 좀 관심이 많아요. 세계적인 기후의 흐름이나 요즘 변화는 어떻게 될 것인지 이런 걸 좀
기후 변화 추세라고 하고요. 가로 안에 지구 멸망. 존번 교수님이라면 아마 빛나는 해결책을 제시할 것 같아요. 많이 기대됩니다.
Coal, oil, and natural gas. These are natural resources that have powered the development of mankind over the years. But what will happen when we deplete such resources? Well, there is one energy resource that has often been overlooked. It's called energy efficiency. And here to talk about that is Professor John Byrne, a globally renowned scholar of climate and energy policies and also a co-recipient of the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize. Professor Byrne, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I know this is your first visit to our studios,
Yes.
but you're no stranger to Arirang TV, is that right?
That's correct. Actually, we saw our first Arirang program in 1995 when our children and my wife and we lived here in Homendong in Seoul.
And why were you here?
I had received a Fulbright Fellowship to teach at the Graduate School of Environmental Studies at Seoul National University.
Wow, so you were one of our very first viewers.
I think we may have been.
Wow, what an honor. Was that also your first time to Korea?
No, actually we came to Korea. I first came to Korea in 1986. So, and I was here as part of an invitation with the Korea Energy Economics Institute to look at an issue of common interest, energy.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So long history and
Long time,
connection with
yeah.
Korea.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
And you're here now because of the Seoul International Energy Advisory Council, which was just
Correct.
launched,
Correct,
right?
just launched, yes.
And the council is formed of 10 energy experts from around the world.
Yes.
Would you explain your role in the council?
I think I was selected to the council to help on two fronts. As you mentioned at the beginning of the program, energy efficiency and also renewable energy and how they can be applied in a city setting like Seoul. And because I have some familiarity with the Korean and Seoul context.
Okay. Well, before we go further, I'd like to just touch upon the definition of energy efficiency
Good one.
as a resource. Because when we think of energy efficiency, I, for one, would think of it as just a way to conserve energy.
Yeah.
But you're calling it a resource.
Yeah.
How so?
Yeah, that's an important point you're raising, and it is saving energy. That is its function, but it's a way of thinking about how we use our ideas and turn them into practical technologies. If we can use our ideas to utilize energy in a more efficient way, then it becomes a resource. We now no longer have to use as much energy as we did before, and as a result, we don't need as much coal and oil and natural gas, the prices of which are climbing, and the uncertainty of the costs in the future make it difficult for us to depend upon those sources. So that's why we've begun to use the term energy resource for energy efficiency.
Beside the cost, how many years do we have left of these basically fossil fuels and these finite sources?
So in one sense, we will never run out because we'll never pay for the last barrel of oil because it'll be too expensive, okay? You know it. But actually, I think realistically, given the demand in India and China, we are probably only 30 years or so of fossil resources that we can afford. They'll still be there, but we won't be able to afford them.
So what do we do then?
So, very good question. I think what we do is we start to use our intelligence to build a different energy infrastructure, one in which our buildings use much less energy but produce all the services that we need, lighting, air conditioning, heating, and so on. We start to build our new vehicles and our new transportation system that way. And we utilize another neglected resource, which is the renewable energy that graces us every day. And utilizing particularly, I think solar energy is going to be a very important resource for us in the 21st century.
I want to talk about renewable resources in detail later on, but just to touch upon, you say 30 to 40 years left of maybe affordable fossil fuels, but we've been talking about, or we've been hearing about renewable energy, especially solar energy, for I would think about 34 years.
That's right.
And we thought we'd have houses and offices that run on solar power by now, but what's happening?
Didn't
It
happen.
seems to be taking too long.
Yeah. Sometimes we think that the problems are technical, and if we can improve the technology, then the rest of the problems will solve themselves, but it's not actually that easy. It never is that easy. And I think in a way, renewable energy was oversold as a technology in the earlier period. But the good news is that even our investment community is now looking at renewable energy. In fact, recommending to investors that they put their energy dollars, their energy wand now into renewable energy. It's the fastest growing source of new energy in the world, including in my country, which we use a lot of energy. It's the fastest growing source of new energy in the United States as well. And solar is the fastest of the fastest. So I think after we oversold renewable energy, finally, your point that we would someday have our buildings powered by solar is coming now. Finally, it is coming.
I've heard a lot of criticism that it's still very expensive. It's not reliable because we need to sometimes store the energy when we have cloudy days. It's not always sunny.
Good point.
So we still have a lot of issues.
Yes, we'll
Do you
still
think
have some
they will
issues.
be resolved in the near future?
So solar energy is going to compete first when it is the most expensive time of day to provide energy to our buildings, which is in the hot afternoons. And that's the most expensive. So it's not competing against the low-cost energy options, it's competing against the high-cost. And in that case, solar energy is, in some parts of the world, including my country, is already competitive for that high-cost market. It is now slated to be, by 2016, cost-effective throughout the summer. So you're going to see this. And this is how it happens. A lot of times when we have changes in the beginning, we don't really think the change. I don't know how you felt when you first saw a cell phone, but I can say when I first saw it, I thought, this won't work.
You mean the big brick size ones?
Yes, the big brick size ones, right? It's not going to work,
No.
okay? I was really wrong.
Should have bought the stocks.
Okay, and I think those who are betting against solar energy are making the same incorrect bet. The technology is sophisticated now, and it's going to be able to be used very cost effectively in the very near future. And on your point about the need for storage during interruption, we're also working on that problem. There's some very exciting things going on, including in your cell phone. We don't maybe recognize how all of us depend upon storage technology for us to carry around our cell phones. So lots of interesting things are going on, and they are compatible. The innovations in cell phones are going to help solar technology, and the innovations in solar technology are going to help us in so many other ways.
So note to self, buy stocks in solar panels now before, okay. Let's talk about energy efficiency then.
Sure.
You chose energy efficiency as Korea's most important energy resource.
Yes.
I guess it's
Yes.
because we don't have a lot of natural resources?
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct. That's
Okay.
part one is you have to import most of your energy,
Right.
okay? But the other really important point, it costs in Korea now around 45, 41 per kilowatt hour to save energy through more efficient devices. That is, if you pay for the better TV, the better, more efficient TV will only cost you the equivalent of around 40 or 45 won per kilowatt hour. But into your household budget, you are being charged around 85 to 90 won per kilowatt hour. So it is far more cost effective than any other option available to Koreans at this time. And it's true in my country too. It's true everywhere in the world. The most cost effective energy option is energy efficiency. And if I can just mention, it also has a great environmental profile. No emissions.
Wow. Could you, I sort of got what you just said. I think I understood the 40 and 80
Sure.
won per watt. But if you can bring it into sort of more layman's terms, for
Sure.
instance, like a TV?
Yeah,
How
let me
that-
try.
yeah.
So my wife and I, we just recently purchased a TV. And the TV we purchased is a backlit using a particular lighting technology, LED technology, invented by Samsung, by Samsung researchers. And in the United States, retail devices like that receive a rating by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And the rating includes how much will it cost you to operate this TV per year. So when we went and bought our TV, the rating that US EPA gave to the Samsung invented TV is $19 US per year, or
Wow, that's
maybe
cheap.
Yeah, very cheap. And the previous TV would be rated around $200 a year.
So almost 1/10.
That's energy efficiency. That's correct. That's energy efficiency. It uses 1/10 the energy as before, and so my energy bills go down 90%.
That's amazing.
That's a good idea, don't you think? And no emissions in the process. So, problem I'm worried about of climate change, we can solve this problem.
But what about the price of the OLED TV?
That's right. So the OLED TV has a higher price, so you have to find a way to make it possible for the savings to pay for the added cost. That's the big step. If the savings can pay for the added cost, then you and I, it doesn't matter any longer. When we go to the store, even if it is a higher cost TV, if the savings are automatically provided to us as a way to pay for it, nothing comes out of our checkbook for the new TV any differently than the old TV. Do you see what I'm?
Yes, I think I do.
But that's the idea of the sustainable energy utility. So I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point.
Okay. You also mentioned that Seoul needs an energy efficiency project. You
Yes.
mentioned this.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so this is really the sustainable energy utility.
Okay.
What we all need is a way now to take the savings that we're going to get by using better intelligence in our technology and be able to borrow against those savings. That way, you and I it doesn't cost us more to buy the better technology. It now costs us the same as it would have before because we're borrowing against those savings. The savings are paying for the additional cost. Sustainable energy utility is a new kind of utility rather than trying to help you pay per kilowatt hour of use. It's going to help you with services. It's going to help you to buy the better technology in a way that there's no difference between the price of the more intelligent TV and the less intelligent TV. In fact, we hope we can make it so that the more intelligent TV costs you less. And when that happens, so we invented this idea and we actually developed it into a real option first in the state of Delaware where my university is, and we organized a investment of $110 million in improvements in buildings for our schools, our hospitals, our public agencies. We got $148 million in guarantees from the companies that installed the better equipment. So $110 million cost, $148 million guarantee. I found myself in an unusual place. I was in front of Standard & Poor's making a case for an investment, and we got a AA+ rating for our, yes. Wow. AA+ is good. That's what the U.S. government is rated.
Wow.
And recently France was downgraded to AA. So it means that the sustainable energy utility has a better credit standing at the moment.
Than France.
So it's possible. We can really do this. We can make this work.
That's wonderful news. Well, Professor John Byrne has stressed the importance of energy efficiency and practical implementation methods in various talks around Seoul. So let's see how Seoulites view energy and environmental issues. This conference in Seoul was about finding a new paradigm for energy in the Asia-Pacific region. It was a time for experts to review policies and explore innovative new technologies. At the conference were Professor John Byrne, as well as researchers from Korea University and the Korea Institute of Science and Technology.
Energy agenda is becoming ever more important in the Asia-Pacific region. And we used to focus on the energy supply side, but actually energy policy requires a broader dimension, especially on the innovation side. So that was why the KU Kids Green School organized the conference.
Professor Byrne gave the keynote address on the topic of new thinking for a new climate. He was a key member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and did much to raise awareness of the dangers of climate change.
Impressive entities.
So what does he think about today's environmental issues? And what does he hope for from Korea?
I think Korea has a great opportunity to develop its energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies and to utilize them to build the new cities and the new society of tomorrow. It's a leader in several of these technologies, including photovoltaics and information and communication technology, and it can use this leadership as a way to build a better society for its people.
John Byrne singled out energy efficiency as Korea's top priority. His lecture was followed by many other papers on energy policies. But what does the audience think?
에너지와 환경에 대한 정부의 역할에 대해서 굉장히 관심이 많은데, 그래서 정부가 과연 어떻게 역할을 할 건지, 또 그 툴들이 어떤 것들이 있을지에 대해서 말씀해 주셔서 굉장히 좋았습니다.
The government and the private companies must cooperate together to find solutions that can finance these projects, and through that we can achieve 10 to 20% of energy used in Seoul.
A new climate change agreement may be one of the most pressing issues we face today. We need to make smart choices about energy to protect our future. Professor, you contributed to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, since 1992, and you shared the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize with the other authors. So can you give us a brief introduction of the IPCC and also the report that won you the Nobel Peace Prize?
Sure, sure. Yeah, IPCC is a mouthful, isn't it?
Yes. I had to read that.
I can't blame you. IPCC was created as a science body to review what do we know and how well are we confident in our knowledge, how much confidence do we have in our knowledge about the prospect of climate change. It was created back in the early 1990s, and its role is to synthesize the best available evidence. What is the research that has passed peer review and can be then published so that governments can make decisions about this problem. So that's the IPCC's mission. We issue assessment reports every few years. There'll be the final version of this assessment coming out in the spring. It's issued in 3 volumes. I'm not sure any of your viewers are going to be rushing to the bookstore for this. They're about 1,100 pages per volume. They're pretty boring reading for most people. Maybe a good sleep aid, I don't know. But
No. I'm sure it's fascinating. Keep us up all night.
I don't know. But the purpose is to try and give the best available information we can, because it's a difficult problem, and make sure that the people who have to make the decisions have the best information available to them.
And was that the base for Al Gore, U.S. Vice President Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth?
Yes. He drew some of his points from the IPCC's work. He drew from several sources, not only the IPCC, but yes, that's correct.
And the film, of course, went on to win an Emmy and also an Academy Award. And it raised such awareness about climate change. Do you find that such awareness and concerns about global climate change has continued since?
I have to say I'm a little concerned about my own country. I think we're paying less attention than we should. But I do think that by and large the rest of the world is paying attention. And the unfortunate circumstances of high energy storms that we've been seeing recently in my country last year, this year, this terrible tragedy that has happened to our friends in the Philippines. So I think people are paying attention. I just wish my own government would pay more attention.
Because weren't there some critics who said climate change is actually a little bit overblown? Sure. There's all these mad scientists cooking up this theory that actually it's just a natural progress of Earth, the planet Earth?
So, yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. The evidence, our job is to collect the evidence, and we collect the evidence. We don't color the evidence, we don't produce new, we collect the evidence. So I find it hard to believe, if you've ever interacted with scientists, they can be some of the most nerdy people on the planet, and to have them in a conspiracy is kind of hard to believe, frankly speaking. So it is the evidence, and it's not welcome evidence, but it is the evidence. And on the question of whether there are skeptics, of course, in any good scientific process, there should be folks who question. So I don't worry about folks who ask questions. I'm used to it. Every time I publish a paper, 2 or 3 peer reviewers will tell me that I have it wrong. It's normal. That's how it's supposed to be. But the weight of the evidence is overwhelming. You're going to hear this spring that the evidence is even stronger than the last assessment indicated. I think we would be making a big mistake to bury our heads in the sand in the face of the evidence.
And based on such evidence, you're saying that humans have a 90% possibility of influencing climate change.
Correct. Actually, it'll be a little bit higher, but yes, in the spring.
In the spring, it'll be a little bit higher. So if we have a 90% possibility of influencing climate change, do we have that much influence on reversing the damage that we've inflicting on the environment?
It won't be easy, because the damage, once we have begun this process, and I'm not saying that we intended to do it, but once we went down this route, the problem we have, practically speaking, is the molecules of greenhouse gases. I'm not going to go into chemistry, I promise. That are
You saw
that are
the
in
panic
the atmosphere.
looking.
That's right. They last a long time in the atmosphere, so it's going to take a long time, no matter what we do, for this process to reverse. Okay, so that's all that I want to say on that point. That we want to be careful about having too high an expectation that we can turn it off immediately. But to your point, can we actually reduce? If I could just go back to that very nice invention of Samsung, 90% reduction in the energy requirement, better picture, better set of services coming from that television. If we use our intelligence for this purpose, yes, we can reverse the damage that we've caused. It'll take a while, but we can do it.
So we'll talk about more environmentally friendly sources of energy then.
Great.
Renewable energy, of course. We talked about solar. What are the other examples of renewable energy?
So we have a lot. We have a very large menu of renewable energies. Wind is one that people often know about. It's very place specific. You have to find where the wind speeds are blowing at a level that technology can harvest. But a very good one, very practical one. About 3 meters below the surface of the Earth, the temperature is a relative constant. It's a constant in Fahrenheit, about 55 degrees, 50 degrees, 55 degrees. If we use that temperature to warm or cool our buildings, instead of what we do now, when it's really cold outside, we try to heat cold air. Why not use what's called geothermal energy options? Another very good one is bioenergy. The use of biomaterials we have to be careful. We don't want to use food sources for energy. But
It's not banana skins then? Biomass, like
we
Back
could
to the
use
Future?
There's better than banana skins, but there are a number of options that we can use of those materials. That's right. You have the essential point. So bioenergy, wind energy, geothermal, and of course solar.
And you said earlier that in addition to solar energy, which is probably going to become very commercially and affordable, commercially available and affordable by 2015, you said.
Yeah.
What about the other sources? Will they become affordable and available by then too?
The wind resources, where you have good wind, are already commercially available. It's why so much wind has been invested in, for example, in Europe, because it is commercially competitive. Geothermal, sometimes you get a neglected source. I think geothermal is the neglected source. Just a couple of meters below the surface, we should be using this resource for our buildings, and we're failing to do it. It's a very practical technology. It's already cost effective. One that actually both China and Korea do well at is solar thermal, utilizing, you put your water storage units on the surface on the roof of your buildings, and you let the natural heat of the sun do some of the pre-warming, so you need less energy overall. Again, a very practical technology. You're using it a lot here. I wish the U.S. would use it more.
I'm not sure how efficient it is in the wintertime, though, when we don't need so much icy, cold water.
That's right.
we need hot water.
You need to insulate.
So let's talk about another, I think we call it clean energy as well, nuclear energy, isn't it?
Yes.
A lot of debate over that, of course, because of the fallout of Fukushima. Germany and many other countries are saying they're going to reduce or get rid of their nuclear power plants. I actually read recently, so that has actually led to greater CO2 emissions from Japan and countries like Germany.
It can, if you don't plan properly, it can.
What is your view on nuclear energy?
So you mentioned earlier about solar, and we've been waiting for 30 or 40 years. I don't know if you remember, but there was a famous American scientist who said that nuclear power in the 1950s would be too cheap to meter. We're still waiting for the too cheap to meter nuclear power. It is a costly technology, and it has obvious risks that the recent unfortunate events in Fukushima remind us of. But we've had it in my country, we've had it in Europe. It's a technology that has a lot of risks. And even if you're not having an accident of some kind, as Korea recently experienced, if you're not careful, even small switches that don't seem to be all that complex, when you have to watch carefully how they are made and whether they meet stress and other kinds of tests, it's a very complex technology. I think that nuclear power is in the same situation as landlines. It's what's called a centralized or a central station technology. And I think we are in an era through microelectronics and others where we are downsizing our technologies rather than upsizing. And so I think nuclear power is going to have a great difficulty competing in the 21st century. It's the landline against some of the other technologies like energy efficiency and solar that are the cell phones. And I don't think it'll be able to last the competition.
So nuclear power plants and solar energy, renewable energy, that seems to be up to companies and governments. But what can we ordinary citizens do? There must be some ways that we can also increase our energy efficiency, if that's possible, or conserve energy. What can we do?
Absolutely. There's lots of things that we can do as just ordinary folks. When you go into the store and you're buying new stuff of whatever kind, we not only need to look at the price, we need to look at what is its performance rating and make sure that we choose the better performing option. When you do that, the higher efficiency TVs, as they make their way in, that's going to be a huge saving for everybody, and that's driven by us. We can make those choices. We can also make it in our own personal affairs in our homes. We know how to use less energy in the home. We've always known how to do it, and a lot of times it takes our children to remind us, who tell us, Mommy, Daddy, you need to turn off the light, or Mommy, Daddy, you need to recycle the newspaper, or all of these are very practical steps that we can do, and it actually is good for our planet, and it's good for our children.
So we are making a difference when we just switch off the lights.
Yeah.
So when did you become interested in energy? Were you an energy nerd from a very young age? Excuse the term, but were you always as interested in energy?
No, I welcome it. That's who I am. I know it's. I became interested in energy in the 1980s when it became clear that we were going to make a shift from one energy system to another. And I, at the time, had been looking at other technology options and had been looking at some different economics that might make it work. And so the 1980s were the time when we were began thinking about maybe we need to think about a different approach. And so on your earlier point, my first book that I edited with colleagues was called The Solar Energy Transition. It was published by the American Association for the Advancement of Science in 1983. I was probably a little bit optimistic. But that came out of that early interest in seeing a change in direction. And what really interested me was, how can we do that? How can we do a scale kind of change like that? That's what attracted me to the field.
I don't remember 1983 that well. I mean, I
was
wasn't a baby, but I wasn't a baby. But was there a lot of talk about climate change or environmental damage and need for greater energy efficiency even then, 30 years ago?
That's a very, very good point. Yeah, actually, in the 70s, because of the oil embargoes, it was really the cost of energy that was driving the interest in change. But along the way, actually, the early 1980s is when some of the earlier evidence that had been documented in the 60s and the 70s now became more widely known beyond the scientific community that there were some signals here that there were some problems. So it actually does begin during that period.
Okay. Well, Professor John Byrne currently serves as the Director of the Center of Energy and Environmental Policy at the University of Delaware. So let's pay a visit to the University of Delaware, which is a pioneer in energy research.
The Center for Energy and Environmental Policy at the University of Delaware was established in 1980. The center has a diverse body of researchers with backgrounds in economics, sociology, geography, philosophy, engineering, urban planning, and environmental studies. They work together to address a wide range of environmental issues, including climate change and energy transformation.
We need a different paradigm, a new paradigm that can be built on a different relation between energy, environment, and society, one that is built out of the principles of conservation and renewability. CEP invented the Sustainable Energy Utility to embody those principles and to begin the process of moving us to a different paradigm and hopefully a different future.
CEEP's thinking is based on the principles of stewardship, shared responsibility, and the commons. We're committed to a future based on justice and sustainability. We recognize the importance for all societies and ecosystems to have access to health, safety, and security.
Researchers at CEEP developed an innovative model called SEU, Sustainable Energy Utility, for redefining energy use. Through this and many other endeavors, CEEP seeks to advocate for energy and environmental policies.
Maybe it's because I'm a Korean, but it's quite surprising to see a university that's more advanced in energy technology and policy than a government or a public agency. How did it become a center of excellence in this field?
Well, I think universities at least are supposed to do that. We are supposed to be working on the leading edge. I'm not saying that we do it well all the time, but that is what we're supposed to do. And in the case of the University of Delaware, there's actually a very good explanation for why we really focused in on this matter. A lot of the energy challenge is a combination of engineering and economics. The University of Delaware has been a long time supported by the DuPont family and the DuPont Corporation, which is engineering excellence, and our economics has always been very strong as well. So it was an issue made for my university to combine engineering, economics, and then policy. And that's what we've tried to do, is to put those three together. Our students take courses in all three disciplines in order to get degrees in the field.
And as you mentioned before, it's the economics and the policies and the state also seem to be helping you.
Yes, that's right. That's correct.
And the state of Delaware is actually quite famous for its energy efficiency technologies and projects in this field, is that right?
Yes, yes. That's the Sustainable Energy Utility. And we formed the Sustainable Energy Utility at a time when electricity prices were slated to climb very fast in the state. And so the center that I direct had formed this idea of a new utility, and we were given the chance. It was put into law, and as a result, we were able to organize this groundbreaking investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy, and got the AA+ rating from Standard & Poor's. So yeah, it was very special. I was the co-chair for that work of the Sustainable Energy Utility with my good colleague, State Senator Harris McDowell, and we were given a shout out by President Obama, which made me personally wow, and Asian Development Bank also has recommended that the fastest growing economic region in the world think about this model.
Is it also being adopted by other states in the
U.S.? Yes. We are now working through another vehicle, the Foundation for Renewable Energy and Environment. We are working in California, in Pennsylvania, and a variety of other states in the U.S. and abroad.
So is this also leading to a lot of profits? Is it a business model?
It is a business model. It's not leading to profit in my case. No. I'm a nerd. I don't...
You're not interested in profits?
Well, and I don't really know how to do it. But I know how to build the model. I don't necessarily know how to... So, but yes, it is a business model, and it is built on making sustainable energy profitable. That's the whole point. If solar and energy efficiency can't compete, we will not make the big change we need to make to address the problem of climate change. So it has to be a business model that can make economic sense, and that's what we've been trying to do.
And most of the investors are private?
Yes, yes. The model is a model that brings private investment into the development of these new technologies. So the $110 million that I mentioned in that investment entirely came from private sector investors. So we sold into the bond market, and bond buyers who are not noted for their wild ideas about this. I mean, bond buyers are very conservative economic players, and they bought our bonds and at a premium. We actually had gone into the market with one price. We sold at a higher price because bond buyers demanded the bonds. So yeah, we did well.
Very good. Well, I'm joined by Professor John Byrne, and we'll be right back after this.
A long time ago we used. We depended upon running water would be the principal way that we would pump and things like that, and then we stopped using those sources, and we switched to the fossil fuel sources. So, but the debate is, should we be calling it energy sources anymore, or whether we should be calling it energy services? That what we're really doing is providing services. What people want is not coal, they want heat, or they want cooler air, or they want lighting.
Professor, do you think Korea has the potential to conserve energy and also improve the efficiency of how we use energy?
I think you do.
Yeah.
I think you actually have some very special opportunities that way. One of the most important ways in which we're going to conserve energy in the future is through the use of information and communication technology, being able to sense what are our buildings doing with energy and water and other things. And you are one of the leaders in the world in so-called ICT, information and communication technology. That data, and used for modeling purposes to say how the buildings are performing, is going to be a really important next step. I think it's the next generation idea that's going to be driving the new energy world that we're talking about. So I think Korea has an exceptional opportunity that way. You also have another, in the case of solar energy, the technology itself is like a microprocessor chip. And you are also very good in that technology, and you are producing some of the higher quality solar cells that are in the marketplace today. So I think that that Korea has the opportunity and the ability to be a leader in this field.
Are there any specific projects or maybe collaborative projects that you're working on?
That we're trying to work on? Yes. And, we've begun working with a new university that has been created in Korea, the Daegu Gyeongbuk Institute of Science and Technology, and it has essentially a green energy department that's working on the next generation fuel cells and the next generation solar cells. And again, I think both of those technologies are going to play a big role in our future, and we're very pleased to be cooperating with DGIST on this score. In addition, we have a relationship with Korea University, and here we are trying to work on the economics of these new technologies, how to improve the economics worldwide and here. And I just mentioned a third, which is perhaps the longest standing relationship with Gyeongbuk National University, also in Daegu. The International Solar Cities Initiative is headquartered in Daegu, and the president is a professor. Kim Jong-dal is one of our very first PhD graduates from the center. So we're very proud of all of the good work that he has done.
That's great. You mentioned a little bit about next generation fuel cells and next generation energy sources. But for the final question, let me ask you to look even beyond the next generation.
Yes.
Because we saw in films like the banana peels,
yes,
crude form of biofuel, I guess.
Yeah.
But are there certain energy sources that we haven't even heard of, maybe that's only come out in science fiction books or movies that you're thinking that could have a realistic application?
Well, that's a really good question. First of all, that's a somewhat scary question, because if you were to ask yourself, when the brick cell phone, as you mentioned earlier, came out, would you have ever thought of all the functions that are now in the cell phone today? I think we're in a world where innovation of that kind is going to happen. And sort of looking from this place to what those new ideas are going to be will probably be off because we won't really imagine in the way that we're going to see new options. But I do think, having said that, I do think that we're going to see some breakthroughs in materials, new materials that we're going to use in storage, that we're going to use in solar cells, that we're going to use in cell phones. These new materials are going to provide an entirely different way for us to think about how, for example, in the case of solar, we're probably going to be using flexible solar cells. It's going to be extruded kind of like a plastic, and it will radically change the way in which we can use the technology.
What about, I think it was in Spider-Man, a mad scientist started building an energy source. It was almost like a miniature sun. It was supposed to be the source of infinite energy.
Yes.
Is that just something in the movies, or is that something that's actually being developed super secretly that maybe you're not mentioning?
I promise I'm not keeping secrets. Fusion technology has been looked at as the way in which we create a new sun. Chances, a lot of very bright people worked on it. I don't think it has much of a promise in that regard. But it is good. It lasted. If you think about it, the original publication of that story is back in the 50s. So the story is still amusing people in the 21st century that way. Okay, but I don't think it has any reality for us.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you, Professor Byrne, for sparing some time of your schedule to talk with us. Who knew energy and energy efficient could be so much fun and stimulating? I'm sorry, but it really was so entertaining. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation.
And that was our conversation with Professor John Byrne. You can see a repeat of our show on our homepage, arirangtv.com. Join us again next time. Until then, bye-bye.